Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. So we are SureCloud. Today, we're here to present a live demo of our IT and cyber risk management solution. The session will be 30 minutes long. And from the SureCloud side, you have myself, Yang, who is the Senior Director of Customer Success and Pre-Sales. Joining with me is my colleague, Christian from the States. Christian is a GRC expert and will be here to present and showcase our solution. Before I make a start, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to launch a poll question, and around 5 to 8 minutes of the session, last 5 to 8 minutes of the session, I will then close the poll and go through the outcome or what people have answered against the poll question. And also throughout the session, feel free to ask any questions you may have in the chat window, and we will be addressing them in as a Q&A session at the last 5 to 8 minutes of this invite. So the poll question has been launched. So who are we? So SureCloud was founded in 2006. As of today, we have more than 500 customers across Europe, with the entire EMEA region, US and Asia Pacific. So we have 2 offices in the UK. Our leadership and sales function sits in our London Victoria office. And then we have a headquarter in Reading, which all our implementation team, customer success team, as well as our product team sits. In North America or in US Pacific, we have another office there. And in terms of what we offer, so we offer GRC solutions, as well as cyber related security services, and also risk advisory services. And all of our product offering is based on the cloud as a SaaS offering. So within the GRC function, we offer risk compliance related solutions for our customers. Out of box, we have 6 use cases that is readily available and can be just deployed and switch on for our customers. And these solutions are third-party risk management or vendor risk management, compliance management, data privacy management or GDPR, audit management, enterprise risk management, as well as IT and cyber risk management, which is the topic we're going to go through today. So what is the value of the SureCloud IT risk management solution? Well, there's quite a bit of value, but the key benefits and features in terms of value are the fact that we're a centralized system that is able to provide intel based on the content stored in the system, and those content including the ability to document risks, as well as libraries of your IT asset, and that can range from infrastructure all the way down to information asset, i.e. data, and we also can help you store business processes as well as your organization structure. So when you want to report out that information, you can understand really what's going on with the risks in the business and what are the risks associated. It can go up the chain of your asset structure, as well as understand how the risk can impact your business process, as well as different areas of the organization. On top of that, we also have a built-in risk assessment functionality, which is aligned to ISO 27005 methodology. We also give our users the ability to define a risk appetite to help better drive how their treatment decisions can be done. That can be fully automated, or it can be a mix of automation and manual approach to ensure that the right treatment are done based on how appetites are being perceived or exceeded. On top of that, we also allow users to document all of the threats and vulnerabilities associated within their IT or cyber landscape. So you can really pull out all that information against your risk, against your assets, to fully understand what's going on in your IT and cyber landscape from a risk management perspective. And then lastly, one of the key benefits we provide is because we have all these content, we want to make sure that it can be managed in an easy way. So we have a centralized issues management solution that, based on different activities you do in the tool, we can raise issues as well as manage and report those issues in a centralized way, so we understand what are we trying to do as a business to tackle our existing problems. this is the last slide I'm going to go through before I hand over to my colleague Christian to go through the system. I'm going to just go through this slide very quickly. So basically, because we're hosted in the cloud, we are capable of providing APIs to any public-facing and open-source solutions you may have, so that it allows you to pull data, and push data through SureCloud solution to the targeting application, and that's built and done by our integration hub team, which is based in our Reading office in the UK. On top of that, we already have quite a few standardized APIs that you can just switch on and use. That includes APIs to specific reporting capabilities or specific reporting softwares you may already have, like Power BI, Tableau, as well as some more advanced communication channels, so that we can integrate to the likes of ServiceNow and Jira to interact with the CMDB database. On that note, I'll move over to the demonstration portion of the session. So in today's demonstration, or within the next 15 minutes, what Christian's going to cover are these 5 topics within our IT risk management solution. The first bit is, how would you document a risk and link it to its associated assets within the software, as well as how would you conduct a risk assessment that aligns to your ISO 27005 standards. And then we'll also look at how do you document risk, threats and vulnerabilities, and how that links to risks. And then lastly, within the asset and risk space, we're going to look at how do you conduct a technical security assessment against your assets. And then finally, from those activities and your data, how do you then raise issues or findings, and how do you remediate against those? On that note, I'm going to hand over to Christian. Feel free to drop any questions you may have while Christian is demoing, and we'll cover it in the last 5 to 8 minutes.
All right, thank you, Yang. Let my screen shared here. All right. So if my screen's coming through, okay, just let me know if you have any issues. Also, feel free to put that in chat, and we'll go ahead and get that sorted out. But this is the SureCloud platform. I always like to go ahead and start on the dashboarding reporting capabilities. More specifically, since we are looking at IT and cyber risk today, we're going to start with the risk overview dashboard, so we get a better holistic view of that landscape and the data more specifically we're reporting on. Starting from the top, we can go ahead and provide a title for the dashboard, as well as any guidance. It's a free text portlet, so we can put any sort of guidance in there to assist the end users, maybe an email if they have any questions to reach out to. To the right of that, we can provide shortcuts or quick access navigation. So this is going to allow us to easily navigate to areas more specific to this dashboard. So from this, in this scenario, we want to jump to the risk register. Maybe it's an action to create a risk, or maybe we want to go ahead and favorite a specific risk that we've been working on more frequently. You can very easily do that. Going down a bit, we'll be able to see a handful of different report types, right? So we can utilize pie charts, bar charts, matrices, grids. So we're very flexible in the reporting capabilities. More specifically, though, if you look at some of the data we are reporting on, we can look at the risk assessments and how those have been trending over time. So at the top left, you can see that we have a pie chart there showing the number of risks that have been increasing, decreasing, remaining stable. We can look at the residual risk ratings. We can also make this a inherent risk chart as well, but we can group on the different ratings and then also see more specifically what they are. So if I were to click into these, I'll be able to see each of those risks and navigate to them. To the right of that, we're able to group on business units. So if we want to look at specific areas of the organization and see how much risk is being brought to the organization within each of those business units, we can do that. And same can be said with the drillable functionality. I can jump into each of these areas and see more specifically what those 2 high risks are. Going down a little further, of course, we can use chart reports as well. So if I wanted to see just a very simple grid view of all of my risks, I can do that and pull over any of those attributes. So in this case, we're looking at the high priority risks. We can see the unique identifier for that risk, the name for the risk, how it's been trending over time, if it's breached our risk appetite that we've set, and then more specifically, that most recent residual risk score from the most recent assessment. To the right of that, we have a heat map. So we can go ahead and plot all the risks that we've been storing on our register into a singular view and see exactly where they are plotted out on that matrix. Now, with that being said, this is a 4-point scale out of the box, but this is something that the end user can customize. So if you have a 5-point scale, 6-point scale, whatever the scenario may be, that is configurable. So going down a little further, we can also group on the board risk appetite and how those risks have been assessed. We can look at the different methodologies that have been put in place. So out of the box, we provide 2. So today we'll be looking at the IT risk methodology for assessing risk, but we can go ahead and report on those different assessment types and then also see the associated scores that are relevant to each of those methodologies. The last 2 reports that I want to cover here, we can look at the residual risk and the relationship to information assets, process, infrastructure. So since this is an integrated solution, one of the key benefits is being able to relate to any data point that we're tracking in the system. So in this case, we're going to be looking at risks in any related assets, process, or infrastructure. And then we can report on the amount of risks that are being brought to each of those assets. Going down a little further, we can get a time series view of how risk has been plotted out over time. So as risk is raised, we can go ahead and see specifically when it was raised, and then maybe see around that time period what had happened. Maybe a new application was introduced, a new system, whatever the scenario may be. We can very easily go ahead and track those changes over time. Going back up to the top, the last thing I want to cover is how to get data in and out of the system. We provide a few different ways for doing that. So if I go to a specific report I'd like to utilize, so we'll use the risk ratings by business unit. And I click on the top right here, we'll be able to copy the image. So that's just going to very simply copy that image so you can utilize that elsewhere. We can also download that into 3 different file formats. So we can go into CSV, Excel, or PDF. And then we can utilize something called a managed resource link, which is going to allow us to generate a link and then use that in other reporting tools, such as Power BI or Tableau. The last thing I want to go ahead and showcase is the ability to schedule the exports of dashboards. So if I open up that navigation bar there on the left, and more specifically go to the dashboard that we are on, I can click on email. And what that will allow us to do is choose the recipients more specifically that we want to send this out to. But then we can go ahead and schedule a frequency for this. So maybe it's one-off, or maybe you have a meeting at the beginning of every month. You can more specifically choose the day, and then even more specifically the time, and then you can draft that message, and that'll be sent out at that cadence. So the next area I'm going to jump into is the risk register. So using that quick access navigation, I can easily jump over there. And very similar to the previous view, we're going to have an intro and guidance section at the top left. You can put any sort of information you'd like to put in there. So a title, any guidance for the end users, as well as a shortcut section. So we can easily jump to more specific areas that are relevant. So from a risk register, it's going to be likely that you're going to want to create a new risk or maybe jump to a specific dashboard. You can very easily identify those shortcuts. Below that, we have the risk register. You can see a handful of different attributes there that we're all tracking at the more granular level within each of these risks. But we do pull all that information up to the top, so we can easily digest that and utilize that however we need to for reporting, or maybe just easily to reference it without having to click multiple times. So if we go into a more specific example here, such as the business email compromise risk, we'll be presented with all of those details. So at the top, you'll have the unique identifier ID for that risk, so you can easily search for it from anywhere in the system to find it. We'll also have the title for it. So in this case, it's business email compromise. And then below that, we'll have the status, and that'll dynamically update based on the state of the risk. Going down a little further, we'll have the summary information or context information. So you'll see the name there. We'll have the context, which is more importantly, how we're going to relate this to different data points within the solution. So in this case, since it is an IT risk assessment, we're going to be looking at information asset. So we can go ahead and see that this is related to the emails asset. We do track all of the details around that asset as well. So when we're performing the assessment of the specific asset, we'll be able to track all of that information. So within the information asset tracker, you can see a handful of high-level information on each of these assets, such as a description for the asset, maybe the format for that information asset. So is it a digital asset or a physical asset? We can look at all the data subjects that are involved, assign ownership and function or group on each of those different areas. And then we can go ahead and look at specific information associated to it. So based on the data types that are associated with that information asset, we can look at the sensitivity. We can go ahead and evaluate the confidentiality, integrity, and availability for that specific asset, and then also look at the classification. And based on all of the values provided there, we can roll that up into a priority score. and then we can go ahead and choose which assets are going to be high priority to focus on. So that's going to be the asset register. And then you can relate, of course, those assets to the risk more specifically, but it doesn't just have to be an information asset. It can be many different areas. As I said, it is an integrated solution. So we can relate this to processes, any sort of infrastructure. Maybe it's a supporting asset, such as an application. You can really relate to anything within the SureCloud solution. Coming down a little further, we can categorize it. So based on the risk taxonomy that you define, you can choose a specific category. Of course, in this case, we're looking at information security category. And then more specifically, if you would like, you can group on a business unit for reporting. We could then go ahead and assign an associated business or risk appetite for the organization. So how much risk is the business willing to take on for this risk? And then we'll get into ownership. So we can assign an owner and a delegate if the owner is unavailable. Below that, we have the identify section. So this is really just defining what the risk is. So we'll go ahead and detail the cause, uncertainty, and effect. So what's the cause for this risk? Is there any uncertainties around this risk? And if it were to occur, what would the effects be? Once we've identified the risk, the next area is going to be the summary. So as you perform risk assessments, it's going to summarize that information into this section. So we'll be able to see the most recent inherent risk score, how that's been trending over time. You'll be able to see the residual risk score as well, and how that's been trending. And then below that, we can see any controls that we put in place to mitigate that. And this is referencing the control library. So we'll pull over a handful of those attributes as well. And you can also navigate to those controls to see more granular details. More specifically, we can see any open actions as well. So off the back end of those risk assessments, of course, you're going to put mitigating controls in place, but you're also going to probably have some open actions or actions that you want to set in place to specific facilitators. So if they're still open, we'll be able to see that in the summary as well. And then lastly, we have our assessment section. So we have the two different methodologies that we had looked at in reporting. Today, more specifically, we're going to be looking at the IT approach, but you can choose the methodology you'd like to put in place for performing this risk assessment. So we'll choose the IT risk, which is based off of the ISO 27005 methodology. And we'll be able to then click on new assessment, and that'll kick off a new assessment. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and jump into one that's already filled out to look at those details. So at the top, you'll be presented with a very simple workflow. So I'll start with identifying the risk, which we've already done on the previous page. So it's going to pre-populate that context and summary and identify information for you, so you can easily reference that. The next step is going to be analyzing the risk, which is another way for saying getting the inherent risk score. So within the analyze section, we can see that methodology used. We can jump into that analysis more specifically, and then we can also see the information from that analysis rolled up to the top level here if it's already been completed. So if I go into the analysis section, we'll see some of the information that we previously filled out, such as what it's referencing. So in this case, the email information asset, how we categorized it, the status, the owners, and then we can also choose a specific asset type to further categorize it and report on. The next step is defining the ratings for the CIA triad. So we'll go ahead and provide a rating for the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And we can also provide any comments or justification as needed to support those decisions. Once you've done that, that'll roll that up into a score for the CIA triad. Now, currently it's based off of the max rating, but we can also quantify this and assign specific weights or values to this if you want a numerical score as well. Going down a little further, we'll be able to then associate any threats and vulnerabilities from our generic threats and vulnerabilities library that we provide. Now, these are coming from the ISO 27005 methodology, an approach that we've taken in designing this application. So you'll choose the threats that are relevant to this risk, and then that's going to pull over the capability and motivation associated with those. So if I click into this, we'll be able to see all of the threats that are pulled over. We are tracking a handful of different attributes on each of these threats as well. So of course, we have the threat actor, a description for the threat. We can relate those to any different assets that we are tracking in the system as well. We'll then get into the different methods. So we can look at the compromising methods, the threat source, and then more importantly, within the threat assessment, we can look at the motivation and capability for that threat and assign a weight to it for quantifying it or scoring it. This list is amendable too, so it's not set in stone. You can add to this or remove from it as needed, as well as adjust any of this information. Navigating back, Very similarly, we can look at the vulnerabilities, and this is another generic list of vulnerabilities that is provided by SureCloud. So if we jump into this list, we'll be able to see a handful of attributes as well. So we'll see the vulnerability, more specifically the asset type that is related to this vulnerability. We can associate any threats to this as well. And then more importantly, the ease of exploiting this vulnerability. Within both those sections, we can also provide any comments or justification around the selection. Otherwise, you can move on to the next section, which is the consequences of the occurrence of this risk. So you can detail the consequences here. If there are any, it's not a required field, but you can go ahead and detail those for informational purposes. And once you've done that, you can then jump into the actual assessment. So based on the information and selection you provided above, what is the impact and likelihood going to be for this risk? And that's going to roll that all up into an inherent risk score. So navigating back, the next step is to evaluate this risk. So now that we've gone ahead and got the inherent risk score, we're going to want to put mitigated controls in place. And this is where you would do that. So you'd make your selection of controls, referencing that control library within SureCloud. We can see some high-level details around those controls. And once you've done that, based on the selection and how effective these controls are operating, we can then see the overall control strength field here. So based on that selection and evaluation, we can provide an overall control strength and then provide the impact and likelihood for the residual risk, which would then ideally reduce the risk and give us a lower score there. The next section is the treatment section. So once we put those mitigating controls in place, there might be some treatment that needs to take place. So in this case, we can follow the 4 T's. So we can tolerate, treat, transfer, or terminate. In this case, we decided to tolerate it, but in the case that you wanted to treat this risk, you could also make that decision and then provide any justification around that. And then off the back end of that, we do provide a centralized actions management solution. So it's not just related to risk, it's really across the board in SureCloud. So we can raise any actions, assign a facilitator, of course, detail what that action is, then make sure that the facilitator for that action or the individual assigned is aware as we're approaching that due date, on the due date and after. And then the last section is going through an approval and sign-off stage. So we can go ahead and assign individuals to review this. Once this gets to this stage, once the approval has been made, we can provide any justification around that decision as well, and then close out this assessment. And that is the IT risk management solution within SureCloud. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Yang, and we can go through any questions in the polling responses.
Thank you, Christian.
And yeah, it sounds like you might be having some technical difficulties here.
Sorry, I've had a bit of a technical difficulty and I got kicked out of the system. Let me just share my screen again.
Yeah, no problem.
So let's quickly review the outcome of the poll. Just bring the poll up and share the results with everyone. So based on, so everyone has responded to the poll, and based on the response, it seems like we have a 50-50 split. 38 to 38% split between option 1 and option 3. So option 1 being we have a simple risk rating, which doesn't go into the details, and we can probably do it very quickly. And option 3 being that we have a risk assessment approach where rating is done through a comprehensive means by the ISO 27005 standard, looking at CIA, triad, as well as vulnerability and threat. So from a business side, there is no right answer. It's what is the most efficient way of assessing your risk with the consideration of how much effort you need to put in to get to the result you want. That's really the scope of risk assessment. But from a comprehensiveness, by leveraging the ISO 27005 standard, it will allow you to have more information and help you to make better judgments from a business perspective on what you want to do with your existing risk landscape. How do you prioritize risks? How do you treat risks? And what is your focus to justify any business means as an outcome? And if you don't have that information, it gets a bit tricky to then get to that point of, am I making the right decision? Am I making the right judgment? That's really the primary difference between using a simple version and using an ISO 27005 aligned version. And then I'll quickly, just conscious of time, go through the questions we have in the chat. So just open up the chat. So the first question I can see is from DTO. You mentioned the ability to add inherent risk scoring alongside residual risk scoring. If we want the ability to track against target risk score, can that be added? The short answer is yes, we can add another element so you can understand whether your residual risk scoring reaches your target risk score or is exceeding it or not. However, the out-of-box feature and the practice we use is using risk appetite. So when you define risk appetite against specific risk or type of risk or a specific asset group or business area, by breaching that appetite, you would have an indication whether you've encountered a risk that is not within your expected scope or tolerance. So it depends on which option you use. But if you want to build target risk score, we can. And then the next question is from Katrina. Katrina wanted to know if we provide the threat and vulnerability content. Yes, we can provide that, like Christian has mentioned, but we're more than happy for you to also include your own threat and vulnerabilities if needed. And then Avinash, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, asked if we can integrate with SharePoint and Jira. Yes, we can. So Jira is a default integration, and if your SharePoint is public facing, we can build an API to integrate with your SharePoint as well. And we have a field type, which is evidence field type, which allow you to link documents from SharePoint against your SureCloud records, as well as attach any physical documents you have to be stored within SureCloud. John asked about how does the overall strength of control get calculated? I guess that's based on the risk assessment page you saw earlier. So that can be automated or can be kept manual. If you want to go automated, what we can do is we can calculate either average or the worst case scenario on all the mitigating controls you have in place for a risk. Alternatively, we can also apply different weighting logic against your controls so that you can get a more detailed calculation on what the overall score is based on different weighting and different control performance. I think that's all the questions being asked. And just conscious that we only have about a minute left, I'll move on to our final slide. So again, thank you so much for joining this session. So on this slide, you have the details of myself and Christian if you want to reach out. And if you're interested in any of our SureCloud events based on what you've seen today, below are some of our upcoming events. So we have some virtual ones around cyber threat briefing in this month. And then in the summer, we'll have some physical events, one in in Maryland, US, on the 7th to the 10th. That's a Gartner Security and Risk Management Summit. And then we have another InfoSec Europe 2022 happening in London at late June this year. So if you're interested in joining, please sign up through the URL above. Well, thank you everyone for your time and wish you a lovely week.
Thank you, everyone.